What is going on, everybody? Anon here, and I very, very rarely talk about Weiss unless there's sets already out there. Um, and a lot of folks don't pay attention to Weiss. They don't know what Weiss is. Obviously, if you follow Rudy from Alpha Investments, he carries pretty much every Weiss set. And one thing I'll say about Weiss, and I'm going to walk through the numbers, and I'm going to walk through some really cool stuff here, is the way that Weiss prints product. You have to order in advance. It's similar to how Bandai does it. It's print to demand, but they go through different IPs. And I'm not going to talk about how the game plays or any of that stuff. I just want to talk about the collectability and really the performance of the sealed product. So, for example, a set coming out in August, I really have to place that order now, which is no different than One Piece, Gundam, Union Arena, Dragon Ball, either one of them. So you place the order, prints demand. Now with Weiss, they'll print the first set to demand, and generally speaking, that's it. Now, what we've seen this year, and it has happened in the past, is you will have a second printing of first edition. And what first edition is, in Japanese, there are on-card autographs, AGR's autograph art, I believe it's called, that are only printed in the first edition. In English, they don't do that. They do, the fancy gold stamps. Now, the second print of first edition, which happened with Nikke and Azur Lane, Volume 2, it's exactly the same configuration. Now, it was clearly a different print run because the case printing, the font was a little bit different. But the cards inside still have the gold print run. Now, a second edition, or what we call reprint, which is what just happened with Frieren in December, is the exact same cards as the first edition print, only the stamped signatures on the hits are silver instead of gold. So that's kind of the summary here, but that's a long-winded way of explaining we don't have a 2-year print window or a 3-year print window. We have a print-to-demand product that comes out, and then there's none of it. And we may get a little bit in 6 months, 9 months, but with your first edition Japanese, once that's out, that's gone. It's gone forever. They aren't going to reprint first edition because they don't want to have to ship cards around, get signatures. You obviously already have the serial license there, so it creates all kinds of logistical issues and challenges and headaches. So if you look at Weiss and the good IPs, and I don't buy everyone, I buy the IPs that I tend to think are going to perform better than others. You have a lot quicker upside than what you have in games such as Pokemon. Historically, obviously now if you're buying from distribution, you're just printing money. But if you're buying on the open market, the performance of Weiss, generally speaking, in a bull market is on par, if not a little bit better than Pokemon. Now, obviously, the liquidity isn't nearly as high. You can't buy 5,000 boxes and move them, at the snap of a finger in 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever. But with a good IP, you can see the market start to evaporate and start to shift. And I want to walk through this, and I want to break this video into 2 pieces. The first of which is just walking through some of the very, very strong IPs for 2025, walking through the most 2 recent sets in 2026. And I want to talk about the back half of the year because there's some absolute bangers coming out that people aren't going to pay attention to. And again, the biggest challenge with Weiss is you have to order 5-ish months ahead of time. So by the time there's any sort of hype in the market, you've already missed it. And there's really no way to get more. Some of the American distributor or the US traditional distributors order a little bit of safety stock. But if you want any meaningful product, you're basically out of luck. So let's talk about Nikke. Nikke initially came out, I believe it was April, May, June of 2025. And it was an absolute grand slam. It came out here, the product came out, and it settled right around $70. It was April. Then we had right here, this was the second printing of first edition came right in August, and then the market tanked. And the second edition print looked like it was about 30 to 40% of what the initial print run was, just from what was ordered. But if we look here, you have volume, volume dump. And quite honestly, the fact that this box has sold 5,800 boxes, the biggest knock on Weiss historically has been there's not a whole lot of liquidity. That is not the case with Nikke. We're going to go through Azur Lane, Frieren, a couple others. There has been very, very strong and very, very prolonged liquidity and in these sets. And I'm not sure if it's a factor that the IPs at Weiss are selecting are better, they're stronger. There's more folks that are paying attention to this, or it's just a batshit crazy bull market and there's more eyes on it because of that and for no other reason. Which I tend to think that it's probably a little bit of it, but it's probably not the bulk of it. So now if we look here, there's 1,752 boxes. Now 5,800 have sold in the last year. Let's go to the last 3 months, 1,000 boxes. And we can see here, this is just constantly moved up as the amount of product slows down. I mean, 6 boxes a day, which is pretty crazy. But if we go down here, 1,500 is Shoo Card Shop. So if we take that 1,500 out, there are 250 boxes on the market, selling 200 boxes a month. Do you know what's going to happen to this product? Probably by March, April, the boxes are going to be $80, $90. They're just going to be pegged to Shoo until, they sell through everything. Now, there is a reprint of this coming. I think it's coming end of March. But generally speaking, the reprint versions don't sell as well as the first edition because the hit cards have silver stamps instead of the gold stamps, and there's a little bit of a slightly different configuration with promos and playmats, which I don't believe are in the reprint. Don't quote me on that. But then if we look at the actual cases, the cases dropped off here, and these are criminally underpriced in my opinion, and really it's the fact that there's 43 remaining, but 11 have sold in the last month. They'll work through these, and if you look here, there's not a whole lot of these until you're going to get to $1,600 is a big step up. So, and here's somebody who has 20 of them. So as this product dries up, we're going to start to see really some craziness. And I want to go through this one real quick. I actually went through this the other night. Chainsaw Man. So this was a set, I think this was 2024. I bought a couple cases of it just because it was a decent IP. But if you go back in time, this thing was like $50 forever. And then nothing. And right here, the market just completely dried up. Right here in December. And it just went straight up because there's 54 boxes listed. For a while, there was almost nothing. But here, this person, they broke a case and they're listing a case. This person broke a case, they're listing a case. You look at the cases on this stuff, and this is an IP. There's a Union Arena set coming out. I think it's Union Arena. Union Arena or Universes, one of the two. I always confuse the two. Coming out, people like the IP. The IP is a little weird, but it's whatever. Then you have 6 cases on the market, 3 sold in the last month, or actually in the last 3 months. Here's my case. I figured I would just throw it on the market because it's just kind of sitting here. I totally forgot about it. But these things move. And again, this is the liquidity challenge that after a couple of years, they really start to dry up. But, for something that was, $840 from distribution in 2 years, it's absolutely insane. And that level of performance is something that you don't see in Pokemon. You certainly don't see it in Magic because those two companies, they're reprinting stuff for organized play so often. When Weiss works, it works very, very well. Now, when it doesn't work, it's dead money. There's not a whole lot of liquidity. But when things turn, and they always do, things improve. Azur Lane. So Azur Lane 1 was criminally under-ordered. Azur Lane 2 was, I don't want to say it was over-ordered, but it was ordered reasonably strongly. This was down to about 500 boxes. There was a second wave of first edition that came to market. It was very, very tiny. But this one seller here, banger hits. I assume this is probably from the second wave because that wasn't there previously. These boxes were up at just over $60. So now it's come down a little bit. But again, we're going to work through the market, and you see the graph. as things dry up, they start to move up. And when things really start to dry up, everything just kind of kind of goes nuts. And in the last 3 months, we've had the same number sold as what's on the market. Now, are we going to sell 9 a day? Probably not. If we sell 5 a day, you're 4 or 5 months from not having much out there. The cases, there's 37 cases on the market. In the last 3 months, 36 have sold. 4 have sold in the last month. But the prices come down on these with the second wave. And, again, once you get through these low sellers, this is going to be a $75, $80 box. And, kind of the sweet spot, $70 to $80, because that's really where your price and your liquidity is kind of maximized. Once you get up in the hundreds, the liquidity goes way down. Where your liquidity is max and the price of the boxes are down at 50, you're not going to make a whole lot of money. But this is really, and the way I look at this is I buy my cases, I'll sell them to subs on Discord if they want them, and I'll just sit them on a pallet and I'll just wait. And, I don't need to turn the cash. I don't need to turn the cash. I don't need to turn the product. I can just wait for everything to dry up. And here's a perfect example. I probably ordered way too much Frieren. Again, I did watch the anime on Netflix. It was quite good. I knew season 2 was coming out in January. It is on Crunchyroll currently. They're doing the whole 1 episode release a week. Everybody I know who's seen it loves it. I haven't watched it, quite honestly, because I haven't had time. It's going to hit Netflix at some point, maybe the end of 2026, but then you're going to have more eyes on it. And the first edition came out at the end of 2024. Nobody knew what it was. It was criminally underordered, and now the boxes are $200 a box because nobody knew what it was and nobody cared. So now we have the second edition, came out, 500 boxes sold. There is 109 boxes on the market, which is interesting because there was way less than that previously. Dude just listed 24 boxes here. You got 36 at 90 and you have 24 at 75. So you have, let's see, what is it? 6, 7, 8, 12 boxes until you're at $75. This reprint, these boxes from distribution were between $37.50 and $42 a box. They're at 37. This set came out in the middle of December. The middle of December. It is the middle of February. That's 2 months' time for a 50% return on the product, which is absolutely nuts. Now let's look at the cases. There are 4 cases on the market. In the last 3 months, 21 have sold. 8 have sold in the last month. There's 2 cases at $1,600 to $1,650 and $1,899. This is an anime that has a new season out. The new season hasn't released all the sets. It is pretty much at the peak of interest, but it hasn't hit US Netflix yet. So this is a product that there's none of it out there, and there's going to be increased demand. So these are boxes that, in my opinion, they're going to go over $100 probably by April because it was criminally underordered. Let's look at 2 newer sets. So these are the last 2 sets that were released. And a lot of times, folks that don't have LGSs are able to buy the product outside of traditional distribution. And that does create some issues. I know it's created some issues for Grand Archive, for Union Arena, some other games. I think a lot of that has been cleaned up now. But you can still buy Weiss that way. And the challenge with a lot of these is, backpack sellers, if you want to call them that. They'll buy the product, then they'll panic, then they'll sell it on TCG Player. They'll lose money, but all they do is push the price down. Now here, we're not really seeing that because the price here is $49-ish. And if we go, these graphs don't work. Here we go. It came down. This is kind of what we expect as things sell and things dry up. But again, there's only 102 boxes on the market. Now, I don't know the IP. I know some folks who do like the IP. Again, this is why I picked the IP I know. Day to day, and apparently it's huge. I don't know anything about it. But, these boxes are $51.50. So they are already up $12, $13 or 25% from distro price. And this thing's been out for 3 seconds. And you can see here, maybe, probably not, they're starting to bounce. Now there's 438 on the market, which is a good chunk, but I assume there's one seller that has a ton of them. Well, maybe not. So, this is going to take a little bit of work to churn through, take it up to 50, 60 bucks. But, when it's selling, well, can't really tell here. It's selling 4 or 5 boxes a day. It's going to move. So even the sets that are non-weeb sets, if you will, people like them, people buy them. Now, there's some stinkers, and let me go through this real quick because I want to walk through one right now that did not do well. And, in 2022, 2023, there were a lot of sets that were super, super over-ordered. Attack on Titan was one. Avatar on here was one. Rurouni Kenshin. This is a semi-interesting anime. I mean, I've seen it a couple times. 88 boxes in the market, 87 sold. 210 boxes, 400 boxes sold in this entire lifetime, and they're selling at $35.50. So this box is selling below distributor cost, and there's not much selling. 16 in the last month, but this will ultimately dry up, and the boxes will move up. But again, this is why I focus on the IPs that I know, the IPs that I like. Anything with giant cartoon boobies, people buy it, and Weiss does it quite well. So what I want to talk about is the rest of 2026. And again, these boxes come out in Japanese, and then 4 or 5 months later, sometimes a little bit longer than that, they come out in English. And the Japanese first edition is cheaper, but it's also better because you do have the on-card autographs and you have the serialized cards. But people in the US tend to like English cards a little bit better. So there's pros and cons to both. But what I want to point out is we have Nikke Volume 2. So Nikke Volume 1 was an absolute home run. We have the reprint coming out here in the next month or so. Nikke Volume 2 is going to be a home run. Dan to Dan Volume 2, we just talked through that one. Pretty big IP. Not one I follow, but whatever. Frieren Volume 2, I just mentioned that there's a second season of Frieren that's out now, 1 episode a week on Crunchyroll. This is basically the set that supports the second set of that. It's going to be under-ordered again, and it's going to sell well again. Now, Funeral for Frieren New Edition. This is effectively a reprint of the first Frieren set that. So we got the first edition in 2024. We got the reprint in December. We're going to get the Funeral for Frieren New Edition, which has some small tweaks. It's like the reprint. So I'm not really quite sure how it works, but the signatures are going to be stamped blue. So they're not gold, silver, they're blue. This comes out in Japan in a month. I don't know if it's going to make it to the US or not. There's a lot of sets that they're trying to push into the US market. This is like the best case scenario for Bushi because they love to print stuff while they can, because they know once it goes out of print, they move on to other IPs. And then the other one here, no, not New Japanese Pro Wrestling, but Brown Dust 2. For those of you who aren't aware, this is an app game. It was banned from Steam at one point because a lot of folks thought it was a little too racy. It makes Nikke and Azur Lane look like they just left the convent. But for whatever reason, it looks like they are getting into Weiss, so they may have dressed the characters up a little bit, pun intended. But I do want to go to, and this is from the official, I think it's the official Weiss Twitter page. I had somebody in Discord translate this because it's all in Japanese. So here's your dates. So Funeral for Frieren New Edition. This is the blue stamp reprint of the first season of Frieren from 2024, and then the reprint we just got in December. Now, keep in mind, the reprint that we got in December was in Japan in like June of last year. So it's not like they're pushing this stuff that back to back. Let's see. Dan to Dan Volume 2 is in May, which is interesting because February the first one came out, so that must be a huge IP, and they're pushing that out. Here we have some trial decks. Life Starting in Another World. I think that's a decent IP. I don't know anything about it, but that's interesting. But then we go to the second half of the year. So after July, we have Nikke Got Us a Victory, Volume 2. We have Funeral for Frieren, Volume 2, which is just Frieren second season, which again is out now. And then we have Brown Dust 2. Now this says Trial Decks and Booster Pack. My guess is they're going to do the booster boxes and they're going to do the starter decks. And Brown Dust 2 did do a crossover with Nivel and IVEL, for those of you who don't know. If you want to check out the cards, feel free. They're interesting. So then we have a couple other ones here that I don't quite know that well. But these three sets, in my opinion, are going to be absolute home runs. Brown Dust 2 is going to be super underordered. I think it's going to perform a lot like the original Azur Lane did. It is a much newer IP. Azur Lane is a 2017 app, I think. Brown Dust 2 is 2022, 2023. It's a little bit newer, may even be 2024. But I just want to kind of introduce everybody to the world of Weiss here. And again, I don't buy every IP. I don't know that much about IPs. There are some DC and some Marvel IPs. They will not print in the US. They'll print in English in Singapore, but they're not allowed to import in the US due to licensing. You can buy them on eBay from overseas, but you can't really get them you certainly can't get them from US distribution, and you really can't get them from crossover distribution, just because people don't want to, they don't want to trip anything bad. So anyway, guys, feel free to ask questions in the comment section for the four of you who are interested in Weiss. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. I do kind of like talking about different games every now and then. And this is one that has performed quite well for me over the last couple of years. I still have some crappy product from 2022, 2023. But again, that's why you have to pick your IP. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But making an educated guess over where the interest is going to lie is really what it comes down to. So anyway, guys, have a great night, and we'll talk tomorrow.